What I'd like to go over with you now is how to graph on your calculators. So throughout all these function studies that we're doing, we do pretty much the same thing every time. We're going to look at the characteristics of a function. We're going to look at the equations, and we'll look at the graphs, and then we do something called a regression for each of them. The regression you have to do on your calculator, but the plotting of it, we also want to be able to produce pictures of our graphs on our calculators. So I'm going to go over that right now, and then you'll use this skill throughout all the function studies. So you should have had attached to this file, the email, that's a page that says Introduction to Graphing. So I have that up here, and we're going to use this. They're linear functions. We're going to use these examples to help us introduce how to graph it on the calculator. So the first one, it has, we're going to actually complete the table of values. So we're going to practice how to evaluate a function, and this is useful as well. This will come in a lot. And then we're going to take those points and we're going to graph it, and then we'll put it in our calculator. And what our calculator produces should match our picture exactly. So then you'll know if you get it right. We are doing this function, it's in slope-intercept form, so it's that y equals mx plus b that you would have looked at on Khan Academy. The one we're going to do is called 3x minus 2. It's in function notation, which is no big deal. It just means that it's like a function box, right? So we're going to have an input and an output. The input, the x's, are in our table. Okay, so we're going to put, first we'll put -1 for x, then 0, 1, 2, and 3. So how that works, if you're not familiar with it, is what we're going to do is take that, I'll write the function up here. You take out the x and you put the value in. 3x means that you're multiplying. Anytime there's a number and a variable or two things next to each other, we automatically assume it's multiplying in math. So for -1, this means that we're going to take x out, put a -1 there, and subtract 2. So you can put the brackets in your calculator, or you can just do 3 times -1 minus 2. Either way, you should get -5. Okay? So take a moment and fill out the table. You can pause it here, fill it out, and then when you come back, we'll go through the answers. Okay, then hopefully you have a table of values, and what it should look like is when 0's here, you should have a -2. When you put 1, you should have 1. Whenever you have 2, it should be 4. And then when you put 3 in, it should be 7. Okay. So we're going to take all of these and we're going to plot them on our grid. Just plotting those points. And so -1, -5, 0, -2, 1, 1, 2, 4, and 3, 7. So when you do that, you should see a line. So you'd get out your ruler and then you would connect them, draw that line through it. And hopefully, do I have a magic pen here? Not sure I do. I don't have a ruler a bit, so I'm just going to have to eyeball it for the smart board. Yours look nicer than mine, of course. But you should, with the ruler, you should pass through all of those points perfectly. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to produce this on our calculator. How we can check that it's correct from our screen, we can pinpoint some of the points or highlight some of the points. So one of the points that you should be able to identify is this is -2. Okay? So I know that this last number in my function is the y-intercept. Okay? And then we could think about the slope is a 3/1. Okay, so let's produce this picture. So what you're going to do, you have some directions. You have a separate sheet that I gave you printed out that has the calculator instructions on it. It's also at the end of this page as well. So you can access it either place. There it is at the bottom. There's one more example for us to do. I think all of you had the 8384, but if you have the Inspire, the directions are there as well. So what you're going to do, turning on your calculator, of course. And to graph it, we're going to look at this y equals, and the y equals in the upper left-hand corner on your screen. So when you press that, you should have a bunch of y1, y2, y3, y4. You can actually produce, I think up to, depending on your calculator model, 9 or 10 functions at once on your screen. Okay. So what you're going to do in y1, make sure there's nothing there, so clear it all out. If somebody was using your calculator, you might have some things in there. So just, you can use the up and down arrow to go up and down between the y's, and just hit clear if there's anything in there so that you have a nice clean y equals screen. And we're going to put the equation in any line. We're going to start with y1. So we had 3x minus 2. The x is underneath the mode button, where you should have a second key, a second function key. The x, it'll say xt theta n. That's the x. So you want to hit 3 and then hit that button for x minus 2. Make sure it's a subtract 2. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you'll have a button called graph. It's labeled graph. If you hit graph, then hopefully you have the line on your screen. If you don't, then again, if somebody's been on your calculator, it might look different. They might have changed your window. So let's change it back. Let's get it back to what's called the standard window. And to get it back to the standard window, if you hit zoom, right, so it's on those top, you have a row of buttons at the top. A lot of those have to do with graphing. If you hit the zoom, and then if you go to number 6, 6 is on mine, it should be on everybody's, but check. You want to do, it should say standard, zoom Z standard. That takes it back to what I call the 10-10 window. So it'll be, you'll have a 10, a negative 10, a positive 10, and a negative 10. So if you look at how the calculator screen is, it's a rectangle, and the dimensions of the rectangle are dictated by your x max, your x min. So you can change that, or your y max and your y min. Okay, so the standard window is 10s. So it goes from 10 to negative 10, 10 to negative 10. So if ever something is wacky on your calculator, just go to zoom standard, and it should get you back to that 10-10 window, I call it. Okay? So if you look at your graph right now, if you get your screen all right, you should be able to see that, if we go back to this, my graph, it said that it should go through negative 2 on the y, and I could see that mine does. And then it's tilting upward. So you can get a good idea, you know, not perfect exact match, but if you see if it's a perfect match, but it should look very, you should be able to say, yeah, that's the right one. Okay? So we could identify the x and the y intercept from our graph. So I know the y-intercept we said was negative 2, and my x-intercept, it's not quite 1, so I can't read it perfectly on that one. It should be about 2/3. It is actually 2/3. Okay, so there's one for you to try. Give it a shot. Produce the table of values with those particular x's, and then come up with the picture on your calculator. So if you want to pause, do that. When you come back, I'll go through the answers with you. Okay, so the table that you should produce, if x is 0, you should have 1. If x is 1, you should have 1.5. If x is 2, you should have 2. And if x is 3, you should have 2.5. And then you could take those, plot them over on your grid, 0, 1, 1, 1.5, 2, 2, and 3, 2.5. And you should again see that they're forming a line. These are all linear. But what we really want to do is produce it on our calculators. So I'm going to go back to the y equals, and this time I'm going to clear out that last one that we did, and I'm going to put 1/2 x plus 1. So you can make the 1/2, you can do 1/2, just put it in brackets, bracket 1 divided by 2, end your bracket. Or you can change that into a decimal. 0.5, get your x, and then plus 1. And hit graph, and you should see it produces the same graph. This time I know that one of the points that I'm trying to identify is the y-intercept of 1. And that matches what's on my calculator screen. So hopefully you're a little more comfortable with your calculator and producing a graph. You're going to be doing this a lot through our function studies, so you will get more and more comfortable with it. But it is definitely something you want to work on if you're a little bit sketchy with it. Okay?